Time now to catch up with what's happening in the morning papers and news websites with BBC journalist Stuart Hughes and journalist and lecturer Julie Kissick. Morning both.
Good morning.
Morning, Vaughan.
Let's start with you, Stuart.
For me, Vaughan, the most interesting story in the Sunday papers isn't the splash headline. It's the second lead on the right-hand side of the front page of the Sunday Times. The Sunday Times reports that the government's former chief scientific advisor, Sir David King, is convening a panel of experts to rival the government's SAGE committee. Sir David was the chief scientific advisor to two prime ministers, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, and he's previously accused ministers of responding too slowly to coronavirus. The Sunday Times says the first meeting of the group will take place tomorrow. Of course, the government's SAGE committee, the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, coming for a lot of criticism over a lack of transparency, the fact its membership hasn't been published, and also the fact that Boris Johnson's advisor, Dominic Cummings, has sat in on meetings of the committee. What I think is really interesting about this story is that Sunday Times says that this rival committee, if you like, is going to broadcast its meetings live on YouTube and take evidence from around the world. The government said throughout this crisis it's going to follow the science, as though scientists are all in agreement. There's just one school of thought. But as you've just been discussing with David Jones, science isn't a single entity. There are shades of opinion. So it's going to be interesting to see how this new group interprets the science, whether it differs from what SAGE is saying. But crucially, the public's going to be able to listen in on the meetings, which I think will add a level of transparency to the discussions, which many people will welcome.
Well, I mean, I've felt this from the start, Stuart, this phrase, the science. The whole point of the scientific method is that you advance propositions, you advance theories, and then you test them. That's what science means. It's not some stone tablets given to Moses on Mount Sinai.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm not a scientist, but we look to experts, and there is criticism about why do we need experts, as though they are of one mind. And of course, that's not the case. And the way that science advances itself is by discussion, by criticism, and by peer review. And I think this new committee that Sunday Times reports on is going to be really interesting, because it's going to show people that science isn't a single entity, that there is discussion, that there are shades of opinion. And I think if that helps educate people about the scientific process, that's got to be a good thing.
Absolutely. Julie, what have you seen?
Well, I'd like to start with the Sunday Times as well. Picture on the front of the Sunday Times of Boris Johnson's partner, fiancée, Carrie Simons, with the newborn baby. And lots of discussion in the papers across the board, really, about the baby's name, which is Winston Laurie Nicholas Johnston.
Winston, I thought Wilfred, wasn't it? I thought, or was it Winston? I don't know.
No, Wilfred. Sorry, did I say Winston?
Yes.
Wilfred Laurie Nicholas Johnston. Wilfred and Laurie after the respective grandfathers, but also Nicholas after two of the doctors who treated the Prime Minister, which is a really nice touch. Nicholas Price and Nicholas Hart were the name of the two doctors who treated Boris Johnson during his time in hospital. Lovely, but I think the bigger picture here, which is interesting, is the way that the respective newspapers have sort of treated the story. Sunday Times picture on the front page, Observer not putting the story on the front page, but I think there's a discussion here around personality politics. When you've got someone like Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister. And there were lots of discussions on social media yesterday, which I'm sure you all saw, about whether or not the broadcasters ought to be leading with the story of the baby's name, when actually, we've got a massive number of people who've died. And for lots of the broadcasters, that story was the second lead. So the figure is is undermined almost by the fact that this little boy's been born. And as much as it's lovely news that the baby's here and he's well and the couple are happy, I think we've got to get some perspective on the significance of one new life being born as opposed to thousands being lost.
Stuart, what else have you seen?
I looked on the most important thing, which is hanging on the wall of my kitchen, which is the number of days that we've been in lockdown. And by my reckoning, we are on day 42. My son has been scratching the days off on the calendar like a prisoner, scratching the days on the wall of his cell. And you might think after 42 days of lockdown that we're desperate to return to normal. But the front page of The Observer has a hint of how much we've changed since the 23rd of March. It seems like a lifetime ago when lockdown began. The Observer's carried out a poll which reveals that fewer than 1 in 5 people believe the time is right to reopen schools, restaurants, pubs, sporting venues. Some of the headline figures: 17% of people think that we should reopen schools, 11% of people think we should reopen restaurants, and less than 10% believe we should open pubs, sporting venues and concerts. And as you've been discussing on Sunday Supplement today, Boris Johnson's going to outline this week what he calls a comprehensive plan to guide the country out of lockdown. But the Observer's poll suggests we may be more cautious about returning to normal life too soon. We're not in a huge rush to come out of lockdown, and that concern, that caution is reflected also in the Mail on Sunday. Its leader column has the headline, "Fear's Now the Biggest Enemy," and the Mail says that maybe reflecting the caution that we're feeling, the simple argument that health and well-being are ultimately based on a flourishing and busy economy needs to be made with strength and clarity. It's almost as though the stay-at-home, protect the NHS, save lives message has been a little bit too successful, perhaps.
Julie, what else have you got?
Well, the Wales Online, Wales on Sunday have got a story which I think is probably something that all of us are spending a little bit of time thinking about at the moment, and that's our hair. Because obviously for the majority...
Speak for yourself.
We're not able to get a haircut while we're in lockdown. And they focused on a number of salon owners in Wales who are talking about how on earth they're going to be able to get back to business. And I think hairdressing is one of those professions that everybody thinks we will always need hairdressers. But actually, going back into normal life, whatever that will look like, is going to pose real difficulties for people like hairdressers. The hairdressers that have been interviewed in this piece are talking about what lockdown has been like for them. Some of them have been doing online tutorials on YouTube to try and help their clients to do a little bit of their own DIY hairdressing. I don't think we should be advocating that really, because I'm sure there's lots of issues around it. But also hairdressers have been doing things like virtual raffles, bingo online. So people buy tickets up front and they win prizes that they may not be able to actually access in salons for months and months. But it's a way of keeping the money coming in, albeit at a much reduced level, no doubt, for people like hairdressers, beauticians, etc. And I think those sorts of professions are going to find it really difficult to come out of lockdown.
Absolutely. Stuart?
Yeah, the post-lockdown plan is hanging heavy on the newspapers, both suggestions of what the government may be announcing later this week and also what it might mean. And for many people, if we're going to get out of lockdown and back to normal or a new normal, for many of us, the reopening of schools is going to be absolutely crucial. We've got used to our sons and daughters working on laptops and doing their studies remotely. But of course, schools need to reopen eventually, and especially for the parents of younger children, it's going to be absolutely crucial. So the Sunday Telegraph says primary schools could reopen as soon as June the 1st as part of Boris Johnson's blueprint for unlocking Britain post-lockdown. The Sunday Telegraph says the Prime Minister is hoping to put teachers on 3 weeks' notice to reopen primary schools in England, at least, no reference to Wales here, to all pupils on June the 1st. first, and it says that the year 10 and year 12 pupils will form the first wave of secondary school pupils returning, and it's going to be guided by whether the transmission rate, that R rate that we've all become experts on, is going to be affected. The Telegraph pointing out that the earliest possible return of primary school children is intended to minimise the threat to development of young children and also help parents return to work. And that's reflected in the Sunday Telegraph's comment piece, which says it's not just a question of welfare and educational attainment, but also family finances. Well, parents have to stay at home and look after their children. They can't go back to work and they can't reboot the economy.
Julie, we have time for one quick story.
Okay, so the quick one then, with my sports hat on. The Sun on Sunday is carrying a story which is headlined Struth. Premier League offered chance to play out season 9,000 miles away in Australia as Perth Senator backs proposal. And the story effectively is that the Premier League has been offered a chance, what they're calling an amazing Plan B escape route to end the season in sunny Australian city Perth. There's a very active English agent by the name of Gary Williams, who's supposed to be masterminding this alternative. Whether or not it could possibly happen seems quite fanciful.
We shall see. I think St. Helena's virus-free as well, isn't it? You can listen again to this programme on BBC Sounds, the app for music, radio and podcasts. If you want advance notice of guests and subjects, follow at Wales Politics on Twitter. More Welsh Politics on BBC One with Politics Wales at 10 o'clock. After the news is All Things Considered. Bore da.